Whiskey Ranch, we wanted it to be open and available for everybody. Whether you're a first-time whiskey drinker or this is the first distillery you've ever visited, we wanted it to be an experience from the time you come in the gate to the time you leave. The parking lot is set and lined up with the downtown view as you walk up to the front door. The doors of the still house open and show off the 47-foot tall column still and the doubler that was handcrafted to match our old pot stills at our original distillery. Everything is around providing the experience to people that works with the whole Texas theme. Texans are proud. We love Texas. We want people to know we're from Texas. TX whiskey is Texas. And we want to make sure that people, first-time whiskey drinker or a connoisseur, can come in, find a bottle, find something they like, sit out here on the patio, have a drink, look at it, and say, I'm in Texas, I like this. I've been with TX for about 7 years now. I was here when we were at the old distillery, original 901 Vickery Distillery, and I led the construction here at this site. As we broke ground, we worked with the architects to come up with a design that would fit Fort Worth, and it was all around rugged elegance. The old wood, the reclaimed barn wood, pan history, the stonework. We wanted something that would fit in and fit our brand, but we also wanted to remember the country club, the golf course, the people that have been here before. The Old Glen Gardens Golf and Country Club, it was established in 1912 when the early history was a PGA Tour course. A lot of fame came from Ben Hogan and Byron Nelson growing up here. They learned to caddy, they started working as kids here and learned to play golf here. And so there was a ton of history around this golf course. Over time, like a lot of the older courses, there were new courses built, and this course kind of got forgotten a little bit. Eventually, the owners decided to sell the property, and that's when TX Whiskey bought the property. We had pictures and different memorabilia that when we bought the property, everything that was in the old clubhouse came with the property as a part of the sale. So we were really fortunate to be able to have all kinds of old history, and we have a lot of it on display in the tavern and in different areas on the site. But the front porch of the original clubhouse back in the 20s, we had this back tavern built to model that, with the stone pillars and the slat fence and wooding.
Whiskey Ranch is basically like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory for whiskey. It's a event center, a tavern, a beautiful outdoor patio, a freshly stocked pond for fishing. There's 2 barrel barns out here, a bottling line.
We do have a really cool secret room. It's called the Whiskey Library. Most folks that have been through have walked right by it and not known it's there. Not on our public tours, so it's kind of something you have to be shown or stumble upon. One of my favorite uses for the library is we actually donate it quite often to nonprofits. They're able to pair it up with a chef and create a really cool experience that they're able to auction off at their events to raise money for different charities around the community, which we love to do.
Something you really have to come and see to really take it all in, to understand how large this place is and just how much detail was put into making this place a destination for people to come to whenever they come to Fort Worth.
We're here to sample the new TX bourbon. For the most part, we're here to hang out with friends.
TX is homegrown right here in Fort Worth.
Yep.
There's nothing better than a good TX whiskey. The bourbon is excellent.
My name is Dustin Snow, and I am a distiller here at TX Whiskey. So I think one of the most surprising things that I learned about whiskey is that whenever it actually comes off the still, whenever it's freshly distilled, it's completely clear. And a lot of people, I don't think, realize that whiskey gets its color from the charred oak barrel that it's aged in, but it goes in clear and then it comes out brown. So a lot of times whenever we get people come in and they tour the distillery and they take a look at whiskey coming right off the still and it's pouring as clear as water, they're like, what is that? I'm like, well, that's actually whiskey, it's just not aged yet. What's really special about making whiskey right here in Fort Worth and making bourbon whiskey right here in Fort Worth is that generally bourbon's been made historically in Kentucky for so long, and making bourbon here in Fort Worth really allows us to showcase Texas and Texans' ability to come up with a really beautiful craft product. So one of the most unique things about the way we do things here at TX Whiskey is that we have propagated our own yeast strain for fermenting our mash recipes. The strain of yeast that we harvested was originally off of a pecan nut, and then from that point forward we continued to propagate that yeast, and is what we exclusively use for our bourbon. And another really unique thing about how we do things here is we use exclusively Sawyer Farms grain from Hillsboro, Texas. And the importance of grain in making really good bourbon is everything. Everything has to be grown very specifically, so that way we achieve our quality targets at every checkpoint. That's what sets TX Whiskey apart from other distilleries, in my opinion. A lot of people may not know the difference between bourbon and whiskey. And really all bourbon is whiskey, but not all whiskey is bourbon. But it is a lot more difficult to make. You know, you have to have at least a 51% corn grain bill. You also need to have a new American charred oak barrel, because whenever that barrel comes from the cooperage and it hasn't had any liquor put into it yet, it's going to impart its most flavor off that first fill and that first harvest. And every subsequent fill and harvest after that, that barrel is going to lose its ability to influence the flavor profile. And it also has to be made in the United States. So those parameters right there make it more difficult to make, but you get a higher end product, and that has a lot to do with Americans' taste for bourbon right now. Why don't y'all come on in and see how we make TX bourbon. Welcome inside the distillery. As you can see right here is our Vendome doubler and 40-foot tall column still. This is where we make the whiskey. But first we're going to show you where it really starts on step one. So basically this is where the process starts, and there's nothing really that glamorous about it, but it's this piece of machinery right here on the ground, and that is called a pivoting conveyor. And trucks from Hillsboro show up, and we will pivot that right underneath the truck, and the truck will unload its grain. It'll go through our grain cleaner, and it'll get out all the little pieces of corn cob and rocks and sticks that come in off the field, and we can get that grain cleaned up so it can go in our silos and we can start making whiskey out of it. And this right here is fresh milled yellow dent number 2 corn, ready to go and be made TX bourbon. So this is our cooker. Whenever our grain has been milled, we introduce it into the cooker. We fill this up with water and enzymes, and it has direct steam injection at the bottom, so that way we can heat our grains up close to boiling, and that's going to release the starches and allow us to gelatinize all the grain, and we can send that to a fermenter so that way we can start fermentation. But this is where we cook our grains and get them ready to create alcohol for us. So this is fermenter 1. This batch was cooked yesterday, and it's just got a couple more days before it's ready to be distilled. So what's actually happening right now is the yeast that we introduce is gobbling up all the sugars through the mashing process and creating alcohol and carbon dioxide. There's enough carbon dioxide being produced right now that it's actually pushing grain up to the top. So you see this grain cap on top? It's there because carbon dioxide bubbles are actually kind of like life rafts pushing grain up to the very, very top. And this one will be ready to go on Thursday. So today's Tuesday, and this one was cooked before the weekend, and its fermentation is almost done. This one is going to be distilled tomorrow, and as you can see, it doesn't have that grain cap on top that you saw on the younger batch because there's not as much carbon dioxide being produced anymore, so the grain is starting to sink back down into the beer. Now it is called beer, and a lot of people that may not realize that you do make beer before you make whiskey. And beer is essentially just a fermented product where you convert sugars and using yeast over into an alcoholic solution. So With the alcohol that's being produced in this, we're just going to send it over to our beer well next and then feed the still with it, separate the alcohol out of it, and then we can start making whiskey. So right now we're looking at one of our 16,000 gallon fermenters being filled up with a cook that is being made today. So after the grain is cooked, it is transferred through our mash cooling system to one of these fermenters where it's going to take about a 3 to 5 day rest to create the alcohol before it gets fed to the still. This is a 16,000 gallon fermenter, but our cooker is about 8,000 gallons. So it takes 2 cooks in one day to fill up one of these fermenters. What you're currently seeing is the rest of cook A being filled into the fermenter. And then after that, we're gonna go ahead and start cook B and put that right on top of this to fill it up the rest of the way. So this is our beer well, everyone. Basically, whenever a batch is done fermenting and is ready to be distilled, it comes here. What it's actually doing in here is you can see it's rotating, and the reason why it's rotating is so that way solids within the mash don't sink to the bottom and clog up our pumps. So where this is being fed right now is right up this line right here, and it goes all the way up to the top of our 40-foot tall column still where the alcohol is going to be separated from the beer. Whenever it's separated, the vapor after boiling is going to be condensed and come back down through this line right here, and it's almost done. It just needs one more polishing up before we can put it in the barrel, and then that's going to go down to our doubler. The finished product from the doubler is coming out right here. That's going to our gauging tanks where it will eventually be proofed down and go in the barrel. And now we're going to go check out our doubler, which is kind of our final polishing of our whiskey to make sure it's absolutely ready to go in the barrel. This is our 40-foot tall column still. And the way that this works is, as you can see, these covers, behind each one of these covers all the way up to the top is what looks like a plate with holes in it. And they're called sieve plates. And as the beer is pumped into the very top of the still, it slowly drips down from plate to plate to plate, and steam is being injected from the bottom of the still. And as steam passes upwards through these plates and through those holes as the beer is coming down through it, the alcohol is actually evaporating into vapor. And the vapor is going to the top of the still to be condensed back into a liquid again. But having these plates allows the mash to stay in the column just the right amount of time to get the alcohol removed out of it. And then it's falling to the bottom of the still where it's being evacuated and sent out to our stillage tanks. And it's also pretty cool to know that all of this corn and wheat and barley that's in this mash is going to be picked up by farmers and compressed into discs and is going to go to be made cattle feed. So this is our doubler right here. And this is kind of the final stage to polish our liquor to get it exactly how we want it. After the alcohol is stripped out of the beer from the column up there, it rides right into this Vendome doubler where it is distilled one more time, and a process called esterification happens. And esterification is a process where organic acids influence the flavors of the whiskey. And we really need this to happen to put out our best available product. From here, this is going to go to our storage tanks where we will proof it down, get it to around 120 proof to go inside of our barrel. Then it'll go to our barrel barn and take about a 4-year nap, and then we'll get it back, harvest it up, get it in a bottle for you. And that's how we make bourbon here at TX Whiskey.
Hey y'all, my name is Jason Shelley. I am the tavern manager and mixologist here at TX Whiskey, and today we're gonna make some cocktails using our TX Whiskey to make them all completely Texan. First, we're gonna start off with a classic whiskey sour. For this cocktail, all you need is a little bit of lemon juice. We're gonna use a little bit of simple syrup, it's just sugar and water, and then of course, TX Whiskey. So to start with this cocktail, you take your shaker set, and we're gonna measure out 3/4 of an ounce of both the lemon juice and the simple syrup. Next, we're going to add the good stuff, the TX whiskey, which is the perfect whiskey for a whiskey sour because of its soft and supple nature and all the vanilla that goes with it. And we're going to use 2 ounces of the TX whiskey. So again, in my cup, I have 2 ounces of the TX whiskey, 3/4 of an ounce of both the lemon juice and the simple syrup. Now it's time to shake it up a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and put ice in my glass. Ice in the shaker. And we're just going to shake it just a few times and pour it right over that ice. And finally, we're just going to garnish with a little lemon slice. And there you have it, the perfect Texas sour. And now next we're going to make a classic cocktail turned Texan, the Moscow Mule, but we're going to use TX whiskey in placement of it to turn it into a fantastic cocktail made Texan. This cocktail, it only requires 3 ingredients. First, we're going to start with our glass. We're going to add ice to it. We're going to use 2 ounces of our TX whiskey. Next, we're going to use a 1/2 ounce of lime juice. And then we're going to fill the glass up with ginger beer. Finally, we're going to garnish with a little lime wedge. There you go, the Texas Mule. And now we're going to make our classic here at Whiskey Ranch called the Boot Stitch. So the Boot Stitch cocktail requires a little bit of effort, and we're going to start by muddling jalapeno in agave nectar and lime juice. So I'm going to take 1 slice of jalapeno here, drop it into my shaker glass. I'm going to add 1/2 ounce of agave nectar. This is available at your local grocery store. Next, we will add 1/2 ounce of lime juice. And at this point, we're going to go ahead and muddle the ingredients together. You don't want to add too much liquid. You're not going to get a good smash on the jalapeno. So we're going to muddle down with our muddler, give it a good couple smashes, really releasing the oils into the agave nectar and lime juice, infusing the jalapeno flavor. Now we can add 1 ounce of grapefruit juice. And then finally, 2 ounces of our TX whiskey. Now we're going to add ice into our glass and into the shaker itself. We're going to give it a few quick shakes and then strain it into the glass. We're actually going to use a double straining method just in case there's little bits of jalapenos or seeds. We want to strain those out of the cocktail. Great. And then finally, we're going to add a little slice of jalapeno to finish. That is the Boot Stitch. And now we're going to talk a little bit about how to taste TX bourbon. Now, tasting whiskey is similar to a wine tasting, but there are some differences. First off, the main difference is with whiskey, you don't stick your entire nose in there. All you're going to do is get a face full of alcohol. You're not going to get any of the flavors. So instead, we're actually going to kind of pass it by our nose a few times and see what we can pick up. You can also check out the color and clarity of the bourbon itself. Usually a darker colored bourbon means it's aged a little bit longer. And yes, bourbon does have legs as well, so that's actually the alcohol that kind of sticks to the side of the glass and then runs down on its own time. From that, you can actually tell if it's a higher or lower alcohol proof. It also speaks toward the viscosity that's going to be in your mouth as you taste it. All right, so once you've smelled it a few times with your nose and pick up whatever flavors you can, maybe some caramel, vanilla, oakiness, add a little bit into your mouth, let it sit on the tongue, and then breathe in and out while it's resting in your mouth and see if you can pick up any more flavors, like some of that oakiness, some of the char, and some of the smoke. Next, what you can do is actually add a little bit of water to it. And what that does is actually going to change the molecular compound of the whiskey a little bit, but it's going to really open up the flavors. They're going to come more to the forefront. You're probably going to find a little bit more smokiness in there, a little bit more fruit flavors. What it does is kind of mask the alcohol, that bite that's going to hit your nose. That way your mouth and your sensories feels free to get all the different flavors involved. So once you've added your water, you can do the same little routine. Just kind of smell in and out with your nose. Maybe tip the glass a little bit and smell it that way. That way more of the air gets to the whiskey itself. And then again, go ahead and put some in your mouth and let it rest on your tongue as you breathe in and out. And try to pick up all the flavors that are involved. With our bourbon, you can find flavors of allspice, cinnamon, smokiness, and a little bit of char. So I hope you enjoy some of your own. Cheers, y'all.
So after bottling, we end up here inside of our store, or you can pick up the whiskeys distributed nationwide. But let me show you something really cool about our actual bottle. One of the really cool things that I like is look at the top. We're using repurposed boot leather, which is a hat tip to cowboy boots. Also, the neck wrap is made out of canvas, which is kind of an homage to the covered wagons back in the prairie days as we pushed west across the frontier. And at the very bottom, you'll see this boot stitch design on the silver wrap. And that's also kind of a hat tip to boot spurs and the silver belt buckles that we like to wear down here in Texas. But my favorite bottle is the Boot Campaign bottle, the Stars and Stripes bottle. Now, if you see this bottle sitting on the shelf at your local liquor store, just know that whenever you buy it, a portion of the proceeds are going to go to Boot Campaign, and they're going to funnel those funds down to veterans who really, really need it.
And we really do appreciate what our military do. The Boot Campaign is one of the different military groups we work with. And as the VP of Operations and being able to see different things come in and different events we have, being able to give back to the military and first responders really feels good. And our people are proud to be able to do that. We enjoy that. And it will always be a part of the TX brand.
To be here in Texas working for a company called TX Whiskey, it's really nice to know that they do care about our veterans and then giving back to them as well. The Boot Campaign is really special to me in the fact that I am a veteran. Not all veterans are dealing with the exact same challenges. So Boot Campaign comes in and they really try to provide a unique service in the way of asking, what is it that you're having problems with? How can we be of service? You know, they're very specific with how they channel those funds to each veteran.
So we started partnering with the Boot Campaign a little over a year ago. That's been a really exciting partnership. They're a really great military family supporting organization that we've loved partnering with. This past November for Veterans Day, we did a concert and event here at the ranch that included live music, cocktails, and a portion of those sales going back to the organization. Recently, this past May for Military Appreciation Month, we hosted a concert and event here as well in collaboration with the Boot Campaign, which was super exciting. And we're going to be continuing that partnership into our next year as well, through May and into November for our next Veterans Day concert with the Boot Campaign.
When people see this story, I really hope they take the time to come visit us here in Fort Worth whenever they're in town.
When they leave here, they understand the passion that is behind this brand. That it started small, it's growing, but that we really care. From the way the grounds look, the way the building was built, the way the whiskeys and bourbon are made.
Whenever you get it in your glass and you're enjoying it with your friends and family, you can know for sure that we're out here busting our rear ends to make sure that every last sip of that whiskey is world class.
This brand is really about making people happy. Whether you drink whiskey or bourbon or just come here to see the scenes and walk around and see the distillery, it's all about being part of something special and having fun. Wanting people to have a good time with each other, people to enjoy life. That's what Texas is about, that's what TX is about.